Shavkhat Rakhmonov versus Kelvin Gastelum is official for the September 16th Fight Night card at the T-Mobile Arena. That's probably going to be the Mexico-themed card that they're going to do. And this is a massive, massive matchup. In the welterweight division, Kelvin Gastelum moving back down. He said he was going to move back down before, but then he took the fight against Chris Curtis. And now I guess that he's got a little bit of momentum. He likes his chances a bit more. Moving down to the 170-pound division. Now that he's shaken off the cobwebs and got back in there and sort of snapped his losing streak that he was on. But he's been given Shavkhat Rakhmonov, which is a really, really dangerous matchup for him. And you've got to assume that Shavkhat Rakhmonov's going to win. By the way, though, before I even get into talking about this matchup even more and why they've even made this matchup, I do want to mention this card is going to be absolutely amazing. A fight night card. T-Mobile Arena, 16th of September, Grasso-Shevchenko main event, the rematch, Grasso-Shevchenko. In the main event, huge main event, a title fight main event of a fight night. Absolutely amazing. And you've also got Chris Curtis versus Anthony Hernandez on this card as well already. This card is done, in my opinion. All you need is Grasso-Shevchenko 2 in the main event and then Rakhmonov versus Gastelum in the co-main event. And you can put whatever you want on the rest of that card. People are going to be tuning in. Massive co-main event. I assume they're going to add a bunch more to it. But let's talk about why they've made Rakhmonov versus Gastelum, because it's a little bit of a weird matchup, because you don't really want to make a matchup where there is an assumed winner between two ranked opponents if you can avoid it. So why have they done this for Kelvin Gastelum? I can imagine it's because Kelvin Gastelum is, you know, he's sort of a bit old. He's fought a bunch of guys. He's lost a few times as well. So the UFC are kind of saying, we're not going to build you up at 170 like we did with Kevin Holland. You're not young enough to do that. You've been around for too long. You're somewhat maybe over the hill, but maybe you've brought it back. So what they're doing is they're just saying, if you want to move to 170, it's sink or swim, and we're going to use your name value to help build up our stock of Shavkhat Rakhmonov that's at the top of the welterweight division right now, because why else would they do this fight if they weren't just trying to get Shavkhat a win? I get it. They want Kelvin, if he does win, to actually mean something in the welterweight division rather than if he beats Tim Means outside the rankings. That's not going to mean anything, and they don't get a big fight. So they want to do this for a big fight. And they want to make it so if they do have a moment where Kelvin wins, he's at least going to be in the top 10, and they can make another bunch of massive matchups between Kelvin Gastelum and the rest of the top 10. But I think they want Shavkhat to win, and I think they've realized right now in the welterweight division that Shavkhat really doesn't have any opponent whatsoever if he wants to stay active. Shavkhat would have to wait until at least the end of the year to get a matchup in the welterweight division, because when you look at the rankings right now, you've got a really weird situation where Usman isn't going to fight Shavkhat because he's now back at Killcliff training with Shavkhat, and they're thinking about doing Usman versus Chimaev. But I'm also hearing rumors of Chimaev Cannonier, so we'll see what happens there. But Usman versus Chimaev is probably going to happen. Edwards versus Covington, the fact that it's been so silent is probably going to happen. Bilal Muhammad is probably going to be the short notice backup opponent for the Edwards versus Covington matchup, so he can get the next title shot. Gilbert Burns is injured, and he also trains at Killcliff. Stephen Thompson is fighting Mikel Pereira in July, and I'm assuming he's going to want to come back at the end of the year if he wins that one. So if Shavkhat wants to stay active, there's no options. Jeff Neal, he just beat Jeff Neal, and Jeff Neal's fighting Ian Gary anyway. Sean Brady's fighting against Jack Della Maddalena. Vicente Luque's fighting against Rafael Dos Anjos. I think the UFC just sort of looked at where Shavkhat is, looked at the other matchups in the welterweight division and thought, well, we don't want to do a Shavkhat-Neil Magny rematch, so I guess we're going to have to do Shavkhat versus Kelvin. And I don't mind this. It keeps Shavkhat busy. It's a big fight for him. If he wins this one, it'll get a ton of attention. He's in the co-main event of a fight night card that's going to be like a last year or year before UFC London type level card, if you know what I'm saying. Like, this UFC London is a little bit weaker, but there's always that 1 or 2 fight night cards in the year that are absolutely stacked, and they end up feeling like a pay-per-view event anyway. This is one of those matchups, and I love that it's the co-main event. I think Shavkhat absolutely brutalizes Kelvin Gastelum, though, and that's what we want to talk about, right? I think Shavkat's going to beat him up badly, man. Kelvin is not looking too great against middleweights. Chris Curtis We watched Chris Curtis get absolutely, and I'm not even over-exaggerating when I say this, even though it's hard to believe. We watched him get absolutely schooled on the feet versus Jack Hermansson. I know he didn't have a full training camp, but still, he got absolutely schooled on the feet by Jack Hermansson in their fight. And he was also getting picked apart by Nassourdine Imavov. So Kelvin's sort of close win, that was mainly down to a headbutt in round 2, let's be honest. His close win hasn't aged too well there. Even though he did bounce back and win, he took a lot of damage in that fight as well. Still took a bunch of big shots. He does every fight, it seems. If it does go into a bit of a scrap, he takes a bit of damage. And I don't like him cutting down to welterweight after that. After so long of not being in the welterweight division. I mean, I don't even remember the last time he fought at welterweight. I'll have to go back and check. I feel like, who was it against? The last time he fought at welterweight was against Johnny Hendricks, I imagine. Unless that was at a middleweight. That might have been at middleweight. I'm not entirely sure. It was at 170, and I'm assuming Kelvin Gastelum missed weight for that one. He also might have missed weight for a few other fights before that. There was a whole conversation at the time about Kelvin having to move up because he even pulled out of a Donald Cerrone fight and a Masvidal fight due to weight issues. So there was a ton of problems with Kelvin making 170. Maybe he's more disciplined now, but the fact is he's been used to a middleweight type of speed since 2016. When he fought Tim Kennedy and looked amazing in that fight. And then beat Vitor Belfort, but got it overturned because he tested positive for marijuana. You know what I'm saying? So he's fought at middleweight since 2016. Which is crazy. Okay? Because he's been there for 8 years? Does that make it 7 years? He's been at middleweight. You get used to a certain type of striking speed. You get used to the Tim Kennedy striking speed, the Chris Weidman, the Michael Bisping, Sawyer, slow twitch muscle striking speed. Jacare Souza took him to a split decision. Powerful, and that's where Kelvin's chin saved him in the middleweight division because even though he was a smaller opponent, he was so tough and couldn't be KO'd that it was still a problem. He was still a problem for other middleweight contenders. But striking speed-wise, outside of his good performance against Adesanya, which was pre-Gyno Adesanya, which was a very different fighter. That was the guy taking Tavares to a decision. You know what I mean? That Bruno Silva's finishing. You know what I mean? So that was a guy that was a different Adesanya just before he grew that boob. Then he gained a crazy amount of power, crazy amount of speed as well. But that was a pre-Gyno Adesanya that he fought. He had a good performance there. He beat Ian Heinich in between his losses, but he lost to Cannonier, lost to Whitaker, schooled by him as well. I just think welterweight striking's a little bit different technically, and I think the speed difference is always a problem. I never like a guy moving up, not liking what he gets from from a higher division, and then trying to move back down again. It seems to never work out. We saw this with Dan Hooker. He moved up to lightweight, had a decent run, started losing some, moved back down to featherweight, and it was such a speed difference that even Arnold Allen was scoring a first-round TKO over him, and that was Arnold Allen's first finish in his entire UFC career by strikes, pretty much. You know what I mean? He had submissions before, but the speed difference, I called it, and I actually picked Arnold Allen to KO Dan Hooker in round 1 for that reason. There's a frequency difference at a lower weight class. TJ Dillashaw moves down to fight Henry Cejudo. Doesn't see the speed coming. Boom. Gets caught, finished in the first round. Whatever you want to say about the stoppages, whatever, but gets finished in the first round. We see these examples. And only pure technicality like an Aldo can really carry you and make you do good in a lower division. You have to be, the main good thing about you needs to be your technique. And that's how it was for Aldo, but Aldo's cardio wasn't as good and he wasn't as imposing or as powerful anymore at featherweight. So that used to be his problem, but his technique was always good. So that's why he could move down. Kelvin relies on his chin, his toughness, his durability, his cardio. His technique is good, but amongst other welterweights, this is a Kelvin Gastelum that didn't beat Neil Magny when he was in the welterweight division. He would lose that matchup. Very close fight, but still. You know what I mean? I know it's an older Neil Magny now as well, but still there's a changing of the guard in the welterweight division. And I'm worried that the welterweight division is not the same one that Kelvin left. So I think it's going to be a shock to his system. And I think Shavkhat is going to hold him up against the cage and knee him to the body so many times. I think Jeff Neal is such a dangerous matchup for Shavkhat. I still picked Shavkhat in the build-up of that fight, but I understood how dangerous Jeff Neal was. I think Jeff Neal was just a better Kelvin Gastelum at this point in terms of how dangerous he is on the feet. I think he brings more danger to a Shavkhat matchup than Kelvin does. That's Jeff Neal, by the way. And Shavkat's had time off since then to still improve. And he's 28 years of age. So he's still young, still making improvements. He hasn't had a crazy amount of damage in his career. That was the first war and competitive fight that he's ever had in the UFC. He's going to get that rub. You know what I mean? He's going to get like, oh, I need to improve. I need to get back in there. I just met the top level and I succeeded. He's got that confidence in him. And he's just been given this fight against Kelvin. I feel like the UFC are just like, well, Shavkhat can't fight anyone else. Let's keep him busy. At least we can keep him busy with a big name like Kelvin. And we can disguise it to Kelvin like we're giving him a big opportunity to jump up the rankings at welterweight. When in reality, they're just, I think, trying to keep Shavkhat busy and give him a big name to get a bit of a following behind him. Because I think Rakhmonov already has quite a big following. I'm just going to check his Instagram right now. Let me find it. Shavkhat Rakhmonov. I just had his Instagram there. I now can't find it. I'll get it. Give me a second. Shavkhat Rakhmonov. There he is. 995,000 followers. Dude's going to hit the 1 million follower mark before this fight with Gastelum even happens. And in a massive co-main event that he's going to be in, we could be looking at early like 1.3 million, 1.2 million. He's gathering a hell of a fan base. You know, his last posts on Instagram that have been out for over a day, 104,000 likes. You know what I mean? 46,000, 477,000 likes, 165, 135, 357, 95, 142. These are crazy numbers. You know, people consider Ian Gary an up-and-coming superstar in the welterweight division, but what they don't consider is Shavkat's numbers are blowing him out of the water. A lot of times, especially in the West, for us English speakers, we see a guy doesn't speak English and we think, he won't be a star. But little do we know, he's got a whole nation behind him. And that's very powerful. It's the power that McGregor had when he had Ireland behind him. It fueled his whole stardom throughout his entire career. You know? So I'm really looking forward to this matchup. I think it's a huge fight. The only problem I'm noticing at welterweight is Usman's kill cliff. Now, again, I think Usman's ducking Shavkhat, you know. He was at Team Elevation. Shavkat's a potential next opponent now. And all of a sudden, he's back at kill cliff. Like, maybe he just wanted to change a pace and to mix it up again and go back to his roots. But, like, that seems a bit like, let me train with Shavkhat so he won't fight me and they won't make that fight. Because we're going to have a problem that's going to supersede the Aljo Murad problem that they have, where they're just basically, you know, LGB lovers, whatever they are. But either way, you look at the welterweight division and you've got Champ Edwards, Killcliff Usman at number 1, Covington 2, Bilal Muhammad 3, Chimaev 4, Burns Killcliff at 5, Shavkhat Killcliff at 6, Stephen Thompson, Jeff Neal, number 8, Sean Brady. Luke Hay is Killcliff at number 10. You know what I mean? Ian Gary is Killcliff at number 13. There's so many of them now. So many of these guys in the welterweight division. We've got to start matching them up against each other. But Shavkhat wins this one. He's going to earn a title elimination bout. Probably against, like, the loser of Edwards Covington. And if it's Covington, he just won't fight him. So I don't know what we're going to do about that. Maybe they will fight if Usman beats Shavkhat and they can't give Usman a title shot again. Maybe they just do Usman Rakhmonov instead. I personally think Bilal Muhammad needs to earn his title shot. So I wouldn't mind if Bilal had to fight Shavkhat. I really wouldn't mind that whatsoever. In fact, I think Bilal should be punished for ducking Shavkhat. He hasn't earned his shot, Bilal. So I'd like to see Bilal Shavkhat next. But in terms of a matchup, I see Shavkhat being too much for him, too big, against the cage especially. Knees to that fat body of Kelvin Gastelum are going to be a big problem for Kelvin. Shavkhat is open, but I think he's going to be able to win in the clinch massively. I think Kelvin is less physically strong, especially at welterweight, than Jeff Neal is. He's way less fast twitch, and I think after that weight cut on that chin, draining yourself that badly is going to be too much of a difference, and I think Shavkat's actually going to finish him with a guillotine. I think he's going to hurt him with knees to the body in the clinch, and then as Kelvin's hunched over from a knee to the body, he'll latch up that guillotine and finish him. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye. Massive matchup in the welterweight division. That card's going to be good. See you later.